Dear spirits, what a horrid feeling, what a foul emotion to have resisted temptation, then having given in for some rational justification, having convinced oneself that committing said act is for the greater good, only to have one's own wisdom and fear proven true, and for the grim consequence to have erupted through the moment abruptly and cruelly disregarding any good intentions on which this path was paved. I had made such a sound argument to Pat and Tills. I remember each word I spoke, and even now I wholeheartedly agree. I should not have tampered with this strange condition under which Tills had fallen. So weak was my understanding, and so limited is the control I have over magic. I had such sound suspicion that Tillinassus was a born natural medium, and I, with almost no comprehension of what that even means, but for that I have found written in various books, had no business experimenting. Oh, but there are they were asking for help and refusing my heart's truest advice to ask the Stoneland Society for their help. I had thought I would but take a glimpse behind the veil with the seeing spell, and maybe gain some slight increase in understanding. I had sought only to educate myself enough to even give sound advice. But I knew it was truly beyond me. I am a pushover for my friends. I, at the end, will always seek to please, so pitiful is my nature. However, they have proven decent fellows, and I was concerned for Tills, and I am so tempted to use what little art I have learned that there I was, in the center of a supernatural maelstrom. I watched as he roared and reached forward. Never had I thought he would snatch the crystal in mid-spell. But I had taken him to the edge of his dissonance. He was confronting the strange reality he had suppressed for the sake of his own defense, and this acceptance was weakening him beyond reason. As soon as he touched the amulet, I watched as the last vestige of his resistance broke, and the spirit of the priestess, already made strong by her long-term drain of his energy, absorbed the power of the spell as well, and snatched him away from us. His hand had frozen on the crystal as his eyes went blank and were filled with white light, his mouth agape, his body jerking violently backwards into the chair as if struck. I could feel the blast of energy from each of his spasms as he began to rise up and float before us as if weightless or gripped by some invisible grasp. She had him. She filled him and consumed him, and I had no idea what she intended to do now that she had him. "Shit, shit, shit!" I screamed. Patrick was dumbstruck and stood frozen without words, with his hand on his sword as if he might draw it. Now in complete panic, I leapt for the shelf, and snatching a peg of chalk, rushed to inscribe a circle upon the floor around him. As I shouted the words of containment spell I had read 4 times, but never actually practiced or used. In full, terrified panic, I inscribed the runes as I shouted the words of ancient Highland Elvish prayer, just hoping I might undo some amount of the damage I had caused. Till's body hovered there before us, seemingly effectively leashed from floating away or being smashed into some object by the angry ghost. I had no idea what the spirit wanted, beyond her desperation of finding the lost curseling child. She had expressed a sheer hatred of the City Watch, and now she fully possessed one of its members inside and out. "What the hell?" Patrick shouted, hands shaking violently as Tills floated in the air like a leaf fallen in a puddle. "What happened? Do something." "Do something? I think I've done enough, thank you," I answered, trying to think of something. You've got to help him, Elder. What the hell is this? The bloody ghost woman has snatched him. He's been packing her around like a damned head cold, and I made him confront his denial, and when he touched the crystal, she stole the energy from the spell and took him while he was weak. The head cold is now a deadly illness. You can't help. Patrick, this is beyond me. It was just supposed to be a seeing spell, a simple divination, but I told you that no spell is just a little spell. There are too many factors, too many chances, too many forces at play. We need experts, spiritualists, mediums. You need to go and get one of the Stolen Society people to help us. I cannot help him. By this point, a voice could be heard from within the hovering figure. It was the voice I remembered from the church. The priestess. Find the boy. He's by the pit, surrounded by the evil of men. He's with the fisher and the flayer. The words brought a cold chill of dread at the mention of the flayer. She's not going to let him go unless we find that boy, Patrick said, as the true realization began to dawn in his thought. Go. Get the Stoneland people. I pushed him to the door. I'll watch over him. Go and be fast. I would have given so much to be the one to run from there screaming for help from my betters, but I knew I had to be there and try my best, even with my limited ability, to ensure that Tails was not hurt. I took my notebook and walked the perimeter of my primitive circle, inspecting the symbols and writing what the spirit was saying. A stillness had fallen over Tails, and the ghost continued its ongoing command to find the boy. As I listened to the words over and over, the barest shadow of an idea had begun to creep into my brain, but it would be yet even longer before I could claim it. I lit more candles and strengthened my circle with lines of salt and silver. I dared not communicate with the spirit in fear I might stir it back into a frenzy. I could not contain. In less than an hour, the door flew open, and Patrick stormed back in with 3 female figures in tow. There was the dark velvet robes of Kostya, the forest green, yellow-trimmed cloak of Lynn, and the blue-red mix-match of Lemora as they stood at the edge of my circle and stared in shock at the sight of the levitating ghost-froze Tilonassus. I hung my head and pretended to be reading my notes. So ashamed was I that I could not bear to meet their gaze. How did this happen? Lemora said to Patrick, who looked at me but said nothing. Did you do this, Eldon? Lynn said with shock. No, I stammered. Not intentionally. I tried to use a seeing charm to determine if he was being haunted. That's a simple charm, Kostya commented as she removed a pair of dark, round glasses from within her robe and placed them on her strange amber eyes, as if they were reading glasses and she were perusing an interesting article in the morning papers. Dear Mother of Shadow, she gasped, taken aback by what she saw. She's wrapped around him like a boa constrictor. I just wanted to see if she were with him, but I do not completely understand what happened except that he grasped the crystal I was using, and then it seemed as if she just consumed him. I didn't realize that he was He's a latent medium, Lemora interrupted. We had wondered as much, but why didn't you come to us? Her look laid me bare, as if she were gazing into my mind. He wanted to, Patrick interjected guiltily. It was the first thing he suggested, but we wouldn't do it. You do not trust us, Kostya said, laughing. You are not fools, then. And yet fools they were for not coming to us. Lynn spoke solemnly. Her quiet words stung and yet bore comfort. I understand your distrust, the mirror looked from Patrick to me, and her blue eyes cut through me. But Eldon, you must have known how dangerous that could have been. Art is no game. I swear I sought only to use clairvoyance and gain some greater understanding of the situation, I confessed honestly. I was just trying to help. And yet art is a fire which easily burns out of control. Casia scratched her chin as if deep in thought. What does this spirit want? For us to find the Curseling boy, Patrick explained exhaustedly. What is it she is saying? Lynn asked, and leaned in and motioned for us to be silent as she heard the continuing chant of the spirit. Her eyes widened, and she looked at the other two women with shock as she heard the words. There now seemed to be a silent, wordless conversation between them, and I realized they knew something. What's going on? I asked suddenly, forgetting how greatly intimidated I was in their presence. This means something to you. Once more the creeping suspicion had emerged in my mind and began growing. Where are the others? I gambled on my intuition. I knew that perhaps they had simply been busy elsewhere, but I sensed something occurring between them. They are out searching, Lynn pronounced, and all three stood silent. They had together decided on something in their silence, and like me, I believed that they had voted on honesty and trust in our integrity. As hard as it was to believe, I realized that they too had needed something of which we could have aided them, but that they too had not found the trust in our confidence to ask, and like us, there had been troubles. Searching for who? Patrick said, seeming far more confused than even me. However, if I knew him at all, I guessed that he was assimilating information at a phenomenal rate while maintaining every appearance of ignorance. This was one of Patrick's well-used tactics. He rarely deceived, but almost never revealed his insight, although I felt he was well beyond playing games at this point. His concern for Tilanasis was foremost now, and he would seek only to end this torment. Mr. Fisher, Lynn answered, and in her I saw a very dimly concealed terror. In her voice was a monumental well of concern. Fisher is missing, I said, and they only looked on and silently nodded. We had thought perhaps he had been taken by the watch. Patrick's confusion began to thin as he heard Lemora speak these words. Why would we have arrested Mr. Fisher? Patrick asked, but he and I both had begun to understand. We had thought perhaps he had become a suspect in the murders. Lynn's voice was broken with emotion. Why would they have suspected Fisher? This time I spoke, but only to study their reactions. There was so much we didn't know, and that they were afraid to tell. I had thought Patrick paranoid for his distrust of their group, but now, piece by piece, a puzzle was constructed before me, and the thought, which had been low, was rising quickly to the light. I had disregarded his instinct, and perhaps, just maybe, he had been right all along. It is all very complicated, Lemora said sternly, refusing to simply lay matters bare. We had worried a person like him, who was so different and strange to this city, would eventually become a target in regard to these unsolved murders. How long has he been gone? Patrick gave no reaction or judgment. I would guess that he, like I, sensed that there was much more to this than they would or possibly could tell us. But in our own time of need, we would not dig or interrogate. We needed their help. Almost 2 days, Lynn answered with tears, welling in her green eyes and trickling over her freckled cheeks. He went to the club for breakfast and a swim yesterday morning. He swims every day. He loves water. As she spoke, I realized that there wasn't an affection there beyond the others. Fisher was very important to her, but he didn't come home. I had made a note already that if they had not begun searching before the first day, then they were used to him being gone all night sometimes. This was not completely strange. I often spent nights out, but for some reason, I didn't assess Mr. Fisher as a gambler or a customer of street activities. We know nothing of his whereabouts, Patrick admitted. I looked up suddenly and spoke almost as the thoughts congealed in my mind. The spirit keeps saying that the boy is with the Fisher and the Flayer. I studied them carefully and realized that they knew what that meant. They were surprised, but not nearly as confused as us. The more I pondered this, the more my idea seemed rational. If Fisher was missing, and somehow the Curseling boy was with him in a place of dishonor and man's corruption, I may have some clue. She said that the boy stood by the pit, and I read the words over and over scrawled in my notebook. Does Mr. Fisher go to the fights? Patrick shot me a look, which showed that he had not thought of this himself. No, Lynn answered, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief from a sleeve. He has no interest in such mindless violence. Why do you ask? Castro looked at me from behind the dark spectacles. The spirit says that he is near the pit. What if she refers to the pit fights down in Hashberry district? Suddenly, as if lightning had stricken him, Till's body spasmed and shot upright as his hands pressed against the walls of the circle as if there was glass, and looked at me with eyes white and pale from his ghost-stricken stasis. His face came as close as the boundary would allow, and from deep within his chest came the unmistakable shout of the priestess. He is near the pit! Get him, watchman! He's with Fisher and the Flayer. They are all in danger. Help them. As I looked at the tormented visage before me, I knew the price of my friend's release. She would not relent until we had found the boy, and as of that moment, I was the one and only person who could possibly get close to the pit fights. I would have to go alone. Intense anxiety twisted my stomach cruelly as my thoughts blurred. But why would he be there? Lynn spoke shakily as she seemed close to tears. Because the criminals think he was the Flayer, Patrick answered flatly. I could practically hear his thoughts spinning away. Was there a reason they had suspected him? And had they proof and support enough to have taken him? He is not a murderer, Lynn exploded. Don't you dare say that! There was an energy building around her as her emotions flared, and having seen what the other members of the society could do, I had no doubt she could be quite dangerous. No, I quickly interceded and moved between them as to draw her attention to me. We are not suggesting that, but we are just trying to understand what has happened. I am sure that there are reasonable answers to all our questions, but for right now, we just want to help everyone. Can you three do anything to help Tilanasis? She looked from me and brought her hand to her eyes in a quick motion as she turned to face Tills, who once more seemed to be slowly spinning before us. We cannot cast the spirit out without great risk to your friend. The safest means would be to placate her demands. I hung my head in misery. I will go to Hashberry and see if I can learn anything. That's very dangerous, Eldon, Patrick said, pulling me away, as if to speak in confidence. Those people are extremely dangerous, and you haven't been around them recently. It's fine, I lied, smiling as I went to gather my things. I could hear rain beginning to pitter-patter against the windows as lightning flashed. Wonderful. A walk in the rain as well. I grabbed my wide-brimmed black hat and coat. We will stay here with your friend. We will care for him. Lemora watched me with no small amount of pity. Do you want a pistol? Patrick asked, as his hand went to his belt. No, thank you, I laughed. I'm a terrible shot, and if they see I'm armed, they'll know I was trouble. I'll bring my cane. I pulled it from the corner, a long black walking stick with a worn brass handle shaped like a raven. Giving it a twist, I drew the sword out from within before reinserting it with satisfaction. Right, like you're a great swordsman instead, Patrick mocked. Very true, but there's a considerable less chance of explosion, and I did take fencing for a year, I retorted with false confidence. All right then, just be safe, mate. I wish I could go, but if they see you with me, I'll be destroyed. I did not mention that I currently was regretting being seen in public with the watch at all. Generally, we stuck to the library and the club, so hopefully my luck had remained strong. This thought reminded me to grab the small leather bag from within my jewelry box, and muttering a few words, placed it around my neck beside my keychain. See you soon, I chimed painfully as I left my home, for so very much danger I could barely comprehend it.